In this module, we're going to talk about how you can read the investor disclosures so you can understand what's going on for your customer and what's really important to their priorities. You probably heard a lot about the 10Ks and the 10Qs. We're going to go through all of those to understand what are the key ones to go and read and understand, and then we're going to give you the confidence to go and interpret that information so that you can use it to confidently engage your executives around the key areas of their business. We'll also talk about the key decision period and when a company's going through their annual planning cycle so you can pace yourself at the right times through the year so that it's married up to your sales cycle. So if you've been in sales for a while, you've probably been told to read the 10K. Your manager may have told you, you may have picked it up yourself and you've been looking at it. This is the annual report. Now, I've been training a lot of sales executives over the last several years, and one of the most common mistakes I've seen is everyone starts reading the risks section. In a company's risks section, this is a regulatory filing, so they have to put everything that could be a risk to the company. Global economic uncertainty, could be changes to currencies. It might be a commodity challenge. There might be a labor strike. Now, this is all very good and well, but actually it's probably not the best way to go and engage your customer. It's like motherhood and apple pie to them. If your electricity provider came to you and suddenly said, hey, your lights could go out, well, you're like, so what? Okay, great. What happens is you can transform that conversation into something which would be of more value to them. Something like, I was reading on Next Door Neighbor that you were looking to save some costs, and actually 25% of your street are saving money through investing into the Powerwall. There's a great incentive scheme. It could help you to save more than 15% of your electricity bills every month. Do you want to take a look into this in more detail? Sure, sign me up. So just think about the difference in that context. And in today's data-driven, rich world, you can go and get all of this types of information from the investor disclosures so that you can go and engage with your customers with confidence. So why do companies report all of these types of disclosures? Well, a public company is public because they have public reporting requirements. A private company, on the other hand, they don't have to disclose much about their financials. So when you think about a public company, it's because they publicly have to disclose. Now, over the many years that they've been reporting this information, those disclosures were less consistent many years ago than they are today. But what investors have realized, especially from events like Enron, is that not having a really clear picture of the company's fundamental business and whether or not they're in good health or what types of challenges they might face or how their business is composed creates a problem for investors to make good decisions if they should invest into the business. So what you're seeing now is a lot of consistency in the 10Ks, in the 10Qs, and all of these different types of investor disclosures, which now allow you as an individual or corporates or institutional investors a lot of information around the overall performance of their business and in a comparable way to other organizations in their industry in particular, but just more generally about how they report. Just so you understand that, again, a public company has to report these pieces of information from a regulatory perspective, and that's really important to you as a seller, so you're going to be able to start reading the tea leaves as to what's important to their business, as it said to investors. So as one example of this, we were working with a customer, and she was an account executive working for a very large payments company. They started reporting a whole bunch of information around their technology roadmap in these same investor disclosures. It was fantastic because now, as an enterprise seller, she was able to go map on all of the types of use cases and their solutions and their history of their relationship directly onto this technology roadmap for the next 5 years. Gave a very clear picture to the customer and to her and her organization as to where the future opportunities would be to go and engage. Very simple exercise. Take that roadmap and put on top of that then your current use cases or your solutions, and then identify areas where you can help them more. Let's dive into the various different investor disclosures that are out there so you have a clear understanding. The first one is the 10K, or more commonly known as the annual report, and that's how it's known as around the world outside of the US. So in the annual report, you'll find a lot of management discussion and analysis around how the company is performing, then the board priorities or the strategic priorities, you'll see some of those risks, but also more of the financial reporting around the segments of their business, as well as then some of the other information related to auditors. Now, there's a lot of information in these 10Ks. This is probably the most single comprehensive report that you could get on any individual company. After their quarterly earnings, you'll see a 10Q, which will give you the information around how the company has performed year over year for that quarter, in particular, if there's been some seasonality into the business, but it also helps you to understand how the business is performing as they go through the fiscal year. So there are 3 10Qs, and then the fourth one is the 10K. It captures the fourth quarter results as part of the annual update. You then have other reports like the 8K, and the 8K is often being published so you get to understand if there is any intra-quarter updates. Now, up until about just over a year ago or so, you didn't often read the 8Ks to go and get too much new information. It was a little bit dry. What's happened with things like COVID is that a lot of companies had to change their management guidance around their business and where they were prioritizing their investments. So the 8Ks become super important around changes to guidance and anything related to changes in their investment landscape. Now, a year ago or so, a company called Performance Food Group, they serve as a really good example in this context. They provide a lot of the food and the beverages that might go into a Subway or into cinema. Well, what happened? Their business dried up because people weren't going so much to restaurants at the onset of the pandemic, but also in terms of going to the cinema, less people were going there. So they had to change their business model quite drastically, quite quickly. So they cut nearly $2 billion in some of their operating expenses that were due to happen. And that actually also impacted then some sales cycles of organizations that had deals in the pipeline to work with them. So being aware of what's coming in intra-quarter is just as important as the quarterly statements as well as the annual report. Then you'll see the DEF 14A, or the proxy statement. We talked about that in the last module, talking about executive compensation. And that one is a really helpful document if you want to understand how the company is performing overall and linking it back to the management incentives. Sometimes even companies will be reporting their strategic priorities in the proxy statement. Now, there is a whole host of other types of financial disclosures, but those 4 are really the key ones that I wanted to highlight for you that are going to include a lot of really gold dust information for you to be picking up as part of your sales pursuits and to go and elevate the conversation to the executive suite. In addition to these investor disclosures, these are the regulatory reports. Most management teams are engaging investors with a webcast every quarter, at least. Sometimes more often than that, they'll have an investor day. And during those sessions, they release an earnings call transcript. Now, these transcripts are filled with all sorts of gold nuggets around what's important to the business. Investors are asking them questions and they're answering them. It gives you a lot more detail around how the company's performing and what's going on. Now, they're not necessarily regulatory required, but 92% of companies actually do disclose an earnings call transcript in addition to that webcast. So reading about them can be super helpful as you're trying to understand what's going on. Let's dive into Starbucks and see what their CEO has been talking about over the last few months. In particular, the thing that caught my eye was how he referenced the importance of those digital customer relationships as a driving force in their business. He also references the importance of artificial intelligence and what they call Deep Brew, which is their artificial intelligence platform. And they talk about how it's then supporting their inventory management on a daily basis, but also around the logistics and the way in which they're thinking about the customer relationships. So there's a lot of information in here that goes beyond then the financials and the quantitative that help build a stronger picture around the qualitative angles here and where you can go and engage them. So not so much pain and urgency, but now there's the opportunity. Where are they investing into in their business and what can you go after to help them to drive value overall? So as we've been building up this case study around Starbucks over the last few modules, now we're starting to see some additional buying groups that might be interesting here. We've seen the core business technology group and maybe even the store technology group. They've got different technology groups focused on in their business around digital capabilities. It's also identifying some additional areas of priority for the business around their demand forecasting, predictive analytics, around inventory optimization. So this is super helpful to compare and contrast and add together to strengthen the arguments for why you should be engaging with Starbucks and their executive team. So when you look at all of these investor disclosures and you're looking at these earnings calls, you can see that that's going to be happening at various points through the year. In addition, you've got those 8Ks, there can be some updates from competitors, and there are external events as well. When you place all of this together on a timeline, you can see there are various inflection points which are important for you as a seller to understand around your customer. When is the right time of the year to be engaging with Starbucks? What's happening around their fiscal year and their cycle? They're one of the fewer companies that have a fiscal year outside of the traditional calendar year. They've got a fiscal year end of September, and they report their financials every quarter through the year. So if you're looking to go and engage the executive suite on those 7-figure deals, then you want to make sure that you have got your timing right. So you're talking to them from April to June at the very least around those biggest cycle deals. And then that will come into the next year's budget, which they're going to be then committing dollars for, usually between, say, October through to December. Keeping on top of that is super critical so that you are always engaging. You always have the ability to then change your point of view and bring to them new ideas all the time around how you can drive value for your customer. So one of the most common questions that I get was, well, what happens if my customer is private? What happens if I don't have all of this public disclosures? They are private for a reason. They don't want to disclose their financials or their strategic priorities. Some companies do, but the vast majority of private companies don't. What can you do? You can go in there and you can ask them the proverbial question, what keeps you up at night? That sort of discovery question may get you only so far. What we'd recommend is actually starting to look at the public companies in their sector. Let me take an example. If I was going to buy some coffee, or if I was going to go and try and sell to Phil's Coffee here in the Bay Area. Well, a lot of people might know Phil's, but they're a private company. I can't learn too much about Phil's from the outside in. But if I understood where investments are going to Pete's or to Starbucks or to Keurig, that might help me to understand how I could transform my conversation into something which is valuable to Phil's. Maybe I'm talking to them around the mobile experience. Maybe it's going to be something to do with the loyalty card. Might be about the predictive analytics. These are all areas that they're going to need to keep up with the competition. And that competition, thankfully, is public. So there you have it. Now you have more information on the different types of investor disclosures. You should definitely be reading these transcripts and these quarterly and annual reports very frequently to understand how your customer is currently focused on where they're intending to make their investments going forward. There's a lot of gold nuggets out there, and you can use that alongside with your existing inside out information of the customer to broaden the discussion into areas of high importance to the executive suite. In the next module, we're going to be spending some time talking about relevant use cases and solutions that you can tie back to all of that management intent and how you can then link it back to the financials. So stay with me as we move on to the next module.